Nathan had just bought a new car with the latest GPS system built right into the dashboard. He was excited to test it out on his drive from Denver to his parents' house in Salt Lake City, a route he'd driven dozens of times before. The GPS had a pleasant female voice that he decided to call Grace. She gave clear directions and seemed more intuitive than his old phone GPS. Everything was normal until he was about 2 hours into the drive, somewhere in the mountains of Colorado. "In 1 mile, turn right onto Mountain View Road," Grace announced. Nathan frowned. He knew this route well, and there was no turn here. Mountain View Road wasn't even on his route to Salt Lake City. "Continue straight," Nathan said to himself, ignoring the GPS. "Turn right now onto Mountain View Road," Grace repeated, more insistently. Nathan kept driving straight. After a few minutes, Grace spoke again, but her tone had changed. She sounded almost disappointed. "Recalculating route. You have missed your turn." "I didn't miss anything," Nathan said aloud. "I'm going to Salt Lake City." "No, Nathan. You need to go to Mountain View Road." Nathan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The GPS had never used his name before. He'd never programmed his name into the system. "How do you know my name?" he asked, feeling foolish for talking to a machine. Grace didn't respond immediately. Then, "Turn around when possible. Return to Mountain View Road." Nathan pulled over and checked the GPS settings. Everything looked normal. His destination was still set for Salt Lake City. But the route on the screen now showed a detour through Mountain View Road. Even though he'd never entered that address, he decided to ignore the GPS and use his phone instead. But when he tried to start his phone's GPS app, it wouldn't work. No signal, no satellite connection, nothing. Nathan got back on the highway and continued towards Salt Lake City. Grace was silent for about 20 minutes. Then she spoke again. "Nathan, you're making a mistake. Your parents aren't expecting you."
Nathan's blood ran cold. He grabbed his phone and called his parents. It went straight to voicemail. "That's impossible," he muttered. "I talked to them this morning." "No, Nathan, you didn't call them. You called Mountain View Road." Nathan checked his call history. The last call he'd made was to a number he didn't recognize. But he clearly remembered calling his parents and confirming his visit. "What's on Mountain View Road?" Nathan asked. "What you need to see," Grace replied. Nathan was getting scared now. Something was very wrong with the GPS system, and he was in the middle of nowhere with no cell service. "Turn around, Nathan. Drive back to Mountain View Road. It's important." "No," Nathan said firmly. "I'm going to Salt Lake City." Grace was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice sounded different, colder. "Nathan, check your fuel gauge." Nathan looked down. The needle was on empty. But that was impossible. He filled up the tank just before leaving Denver. "You're running out of gas, Nathan. The nearest station is on Mountain View Road." Nathan's heart started racing. The engine sputtered once, then continued running. He was still hours away from Salt Lake City, and there were no gas stations visible ahead. "Fine," Nathan said. "Where's Mountain View Road?" "Take the next exit and follow the signs." Nathan had no choice. He took the next exit, which led to a narrow mountain road. A weather sign read Mountain View Road, 5 miles. As he drove deeper into the mountains, Nathan noticed something strange. The trees looked wrong. They were too tall, too dark, and they seemed to lean inward over the road, like they were trying to block out the sky. "You're almost there, Nathan," Grace said softly. "Almost where? What's supposed to be here?" "Your real destination."
The road ended at a small clearing with a single building, an old gas station that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. But the lights were on and there was a man standing by the pumps. Nathan pulled up to the station. The man approached his window. He was middle-aged with kind eyes and a sad smile. "You're Nathan Morrison," the man said. It wasn't a question. "How do you know my name?" "Because I've been waiting for you. My name is David. I'm your brother." Nathan stared at him. "I don't have a brother." "You did, 23 years ago when we were kids. Our family was driving to Salt Lake City for Christmas. We took a wrong turn somewhere in these mountains. Our car went off the road." David's eyes filled with tears. "Everyone died, Nathan. Everyone except you. You were thrown clear of the wreckage." "That's not true," Nathan said, but his voice was shaking. "I'm driving to see my parents right now." "Nathan, your parents died in 1999. You've been driving the same route every year on the anniversary, trying to reach them. But you always end up here, where it happened." Nathan looked around the clearing. Through the trees he could see twisted metal and broken glass. The remains of a car accident from long ago. "The GPS brings you here because this is where you need to be," David continued. "This is where you need to remember." Nathan's memories started flooding back. The accident, the hospital, the years of therapy, the guilt of being the only survivor. Grace spoke one more time. "Welcome home, Nathan." Nathan turned off the car and stepped out. For the first time in 23 years, he stopped trying to reach his parents and started trying to say goodbye. The next morning, hikers found Nathan's car in the clearing, empty but running. The GPS screen showed a message. Destination reached. Nathan was never seen again, but locals say that sometimes, late at night, you can hear two voices in the mountains. Brothers finally reunited, no longer lost on the road between the living and the dead. Leslie had been driving the same route home from work for 8 years. Every weeknight, she took Highway 76 from downtown to her house in the suburbs. She knew every curve, every hill, every landmark along the way. So when the road started changing, she noticed immediately. It began small, a curve that seemed slightly sharper than usual, a hill that felt steeper. Leslie chalked it up to tiredness or distraction. She'd been working long hours and maybe she just wasn't paying attention like she usually did. But then the changes became impossible to ignore. One Thursday night in November, Leslie was driving her usual route when she realized she'd been on the highway for over an hour. The drive normally took 25 minutes. She pulled over and checked her GPS. According to the app, she was still on Highway 76, but the estimated time to her destination kept changing. First it said 15 minutes, then 30, then 45. Leslie had driven this road thousands of times. She knew it was exactly 18.7 miles from her office to her house, but now her odometer showed she'd already traveled 30 miles, and familiar landmarks were nowhere to be seen. She decided to turn around and go back the way she came. But when she made a U-turn, the road behind her looked different too. Hills that should have been there were gone. The shopping center where she sometimes stopped for gas had vanished. Leslie drove back toward downtown, but after 20 minutes, she still hadn't reached any landmarks she recognized. The highway stretched ahead of her, like an endless ribbon of asphalt, lit only by her headlights and the occasional streetlight. She pulled over again and tried calling her husband, Mark.
"Hi, where are you?" Mark asked. "You left work 3 hours ago." 3 hours? Leslie looked at her clock. It was 11 p.m. She left the office at 8 p.m., just like always. "I'm on Highway 76, but something's wrong. The road doesn't look right." "What do you mean?" Leslie tried to explain, but it sounded crazy even to her. "The highway is longer than it should be. I've been driving for hours, but I haven't reached home or gone back to downtown." Mark was quiet for a moment. "Leslie, are you feeling okay? Maybe you should pull over and rest." "I am pulled over. Mark, I need you to drive Highway 76 from the other direction. Meet me somewhere in the middle." "Okay, I'm getting in the car now." Leslie waited on the side of the road. After 45 minutes, Mark called back. "Leslie, I drove the entire highway twice. You're not here. I can't find you anywhere." "That's impossible. I'm on Highway 76, about 10 miles from the Maple Street exit." "There is no Maple Street exit on Highway 76. Leslie looked around. There was indeed a green highway sign that read Maple Street, exit 15. She'd never seen it before in 8 years of driving this route. "Mark, the exit signs are different. There are exits here that don't exist." Mark's voice was getting worried. "Leslie, I want you to drive to the nearest police station. Something's not right." Leslie got back on the highway and took the next exit, which was labeled Police Services, Exit 17. The exit ramp led to a small building with a sign reading Highway Patrol Substation 76. Inside, a single officer was working the night shift. Officer Chen looked up when Leslie entered. "Can I help you?" Leslie explained her situation. Officer Chen listened patiently, but Leslie could see the confusion in his eyes. "Ma'am, Highway 76 is a straight shot, 18.7 miles. There's no exit 15 or exit 17, and there's definitely no police substation on that highway. But I'm here," Leslie said. "You have a sign outside that says Substation 76. Officer Chen looked puzzled. He walked outside with Leslie and stared at the sign like he was seeing it for the first time. "That's strange," he said. "I've worked this substation for 5 years, but I've never noticed that sign before." He got on his radio and called his supervisor. After a brief conversation, he turned back to Leslie with a concerned expression. "Ma'am, according to my supervisor, there is no Substation 76. This building is supposed to be an abandoned maintenance facility." Leslie felt like the world was tilting around her. "Then who are you? How are you here?" Officer Chen looked at his badge, then at his uniform, as if seeing them for the first time. I don't know." Leslie ran back to her car. She had to get off this impossible highway and find her way back to the real world. She drove to the next exit, which was labeled Reality Check, Exit 19. The name made her skin crawl, but she took it anyway. The exit ramp led to an empty parking lot with a single street light. At the far end of the lot was a phone booth, the old-fashioned kind that barely existed anymore. Leslie parked and walked to the phone booth. Inside was a handwritten note taped to the phone. "If you're reading this, you've driven onto Highway 76B, a road that exists parallel to the real Highway 76. This highway stretches as long as it needs to, creating exits and destinations to keep drivers trapped. The only way out is to stop trying to get somewhere and start trying to get nowhere. Drive with no destination in mind. Don't follow signs. Don't trust your GPS. Don't try to go home. Just drive until the road decides to let you go." The note was signed Thomas K. Trapped here 1987 to 1994. Leslie crumpled up the note and got back in her car. She drove back onto the highway, but this time she ignored all the signs. When she came to exits, she didn't take them. When her GPS tried to give her directions, she turned it off. She just drove. For what felt like hours, Leslie drove straight ahead. The highway began to look familiar again. The hills were in the right places. The curves matched her memory. Finally, she saw her exit, the real exit, with the correct number and the landmark she knew. Leslie took the exit and drove home. Mark was waiting in the driveway, frantic with worry. "Where have you been? You've been gone for 12 hours. Leslie looked at her clock. It was 8 a.m. She'd been driving all night. The next morning, Leslie called in sick to work. She drove Highway 76 in the daylight, checking every exit, every sign, every landmark. Everything was normal. 18.7 miles, just like always. No exit 15, no exit 17, no police substation. But that night, when Leslie drove home from work, she noticed something that made her hands shake on the steering wheel. There was a new exit sign. Highway 76B, next right. Leslie drove past it and never looked back. But in her rearview mirror, she could see other cars taking that exit, their taillights disappearing into a darkness that seemed deeper than the night around it. She still drives Highway 76 to work every day, but now she knows that somewhere, running parallel to the real world, there's another version of her road. A highway that moves and changes and traps drivers in an endless loop of exits that lead nowhere. And sometimes, late at night when she's driving home, Leslie wonders if she ever really escaped Highway 76B, or if she's still driving it, thinking she made it home, while actually circling forever through a world that only exists in the space between where you are and where you're trying to go. It was driving cross country from California to New York. taking the southern route through Arizona and New Mexico. He'd been driving for 12 hours straight and needed to rest. It was around 2 a.m. when he saw the sign, "Rest Area, 2 miles." Jake had studied his route carefully and didn't remember seeing a rest stop marked on his map, but he was too tired to care. The exit led to a small parking area with a few picnic tables and a single building that looked like it was built in the 1960s. There were no other cars, which seemed odd for a major highway, but Jake was grateful for the quiet. He parked and walked toward the building, hoping to find restrooms and maybe a vending machine. The building had large windows, but they were all dark inside. The front door was unlocked. Jake pushed it open and found himself in what looked like an old visitor center. There were dusty brochures on racks, faded maps on the walls, and a reception desk with an old-fashioned guest book. The place felt frozen in time. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, and the air smelled stale, like it had been closed up for years. Jake signed the guest book, more out of curiosity than anything else. As he flipped through the pages, he noticed something strange. The entries went back decades, but they all seemed to be from people passing through at night. "Rest stop saved my life, too tired to drive. David, 1987. Strange place, but glad it was here. Patricia, 1992. Why isn't this on any map? Miguel, 2001. Jake kept reading. Entry after entry from night travelers, all expressing the same confusion about the rest stop not being on any maps. The last entry before his was dated just 1 week earlier. "Something's not right about this place. The man at the desk keeps staring at me, but there's no one here. Amanda." Jake looked around. There was no man at the desk. The place was completely empty. He decided to leave, but as he reached the door, he heard footsteps behind him. Jake turned around and there was a man standing behind the reception desk, wearing a uniform that looked like it was from the 1960s. The man was pale and thin, with hollow cheeks and dark circles under his eyes. He smiled at Jake, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Checking out already?" the man asked. His voice sounded distant, like it was coming from far away. "I was just looking around," Jake said, backing toward the door. "Most folks stay longer," the man replied. "It's safe here, safer than the road." Jake's hand found the door handle. "I need to keep driving." The man's smile faded. "The road's dangerous at night. Lots of accidents. People die out there." Jake pushed through the door and ran to his car. As he drove away, he looked in his rearview mirror and saw the man standing in the doorway, watching him leave. The next morning, Jake stopped at a gas station and asked about the rest stop. The attendant looked confused. "There's no rest stop on that stretch of highway," he said. "Hasn't been one for 30 years. "But I was just there," Jake insisted. The attendant pulled out a highway map and showed Jake the route. There was no rest stop marked anywhere. Jake called the highway department when he got home. They told him the same thing. No rest stop on that section of highway. But when Jake described the location, the woman on the phone went quiet. "Sir," she finally said, "there was a rest stop there, but it was closed in 1989 after a series of accidents. The building was supposed to be demolished, but the state ran out of funding. As far as we know, it's been empty for over 30 years. Jake never forgot about that night. He tried to find the rest stop again on his next cross-country trip, but the exit was gone. Just highway stretching into the darkness. Diane was driving home from visiting her sister in Portland, Oregon. The drive back to Seattle usually took about 3 hours, but she'd left late and found herself on Interstate 5 well past midnight. She was tired of her usual playlist and decided to scan through the radio stations. Most were playing static or had signed off for the night, but she found one clear signal on AM 640. A man's voice was reading what sounded like news updates, but something was off about the content. "The accident on Highway 18 has claimed its third victim. Rescue workers are still searching for survivors in the wreckage. The driver, identified as Diane Morrison, was pronounced dead at the scene." Diane's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Diane Morrison was her name. She told herself it was just a coincidence. Morrison was a common name, but then the radio continued. "Morrison was driving a 2018 Honda Civic, license plate number The announcer read off her exact license plate number. Diane's heart started racing. She reached for the radio to change the station, but the man's voice continued.
The victim was traveling north on Interstate 5 when she lost control of her vehicle near mile marker 127.
Diane looked at the mile marker she was passing. Mile marker 125. She was 2 miles away from the accident the radio was describing. Diane slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the shoulder. She grabbed her phone to call 911, but there was no signal. She tried the radio again, hoping to find a different station. The AM 640 was still coming in clear. Now a different voice was speaking, a woman this time.
We're getting reports of another incident on Interstate 5, a single vehicle accident near mile marker 127. The driver appears to have fallen asleep at the wheel.
Diane looked ahead down the dark highway. She could see the faint glow of flashing lights in the distance, right where mile marker 127 would be. She put the car in drive and slowly approached the scene. As she got closer, she could see police cars, an ambulance, and a tow truck. A car had gone off the road and hit a tree. Diane pulled over near the emergency vehicles. A police officer approached her window.
Ma'am, you need to keep moving. We're working an accident scene here.
What happened? Diane asked.
Single car accident. Driver fell asleep at the wheel. We're still investigating.
Diane's blood ran cold. Was her name Diane Morrison? The officer looked surprised.
How did you know that? We haven't released any information yet.
Diane couldn't speak. She just pointed at her radio, which was still playing.
The Morrison family has been notified of the accident. Funeral services will be held on Tuesday at Morrison Funeral Home.
The officer leaned closer to listen, but then looked confused.
Ma'am, your radio isn't on.
Diane looked down. The radio display was dark. The car was silent. But I just heard, she started to say.
Ma'am, are you feeling all right? You look pale.
Diane looked at the accident scene again. The car that had crashed was a 2018 Honda Civic, the same model as hers. The same color, too. She gave her statement to the police and drove home in complete silence, afraid to turn the radio back on. The next morning, Diane called the radio station that broadcasts on AM 640.
The receptionist told her that AM 640 had been off the air for over 5 years. But I heard a broadcast last night.
Diane insisted.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but that's impossible. We haven't transmitted on that frequency since 2018.
Diane hung up and did some research online. She found news articles about the accident she'd witnessed. The victim was indeed named Diane Morrison, but she was from California, not Oregon. The woman had been driving north on Interstate 5, just like Diane had been. The article mentioned that the victim had called her sister just hours before the accident, saying she was tired but wanted to make it home that night. Diane had also been visiting her sister. She had also been tired. She had also wanted to make it home that night. The only difference was that Diane had stopped when she heard the radio broadcast. Diane still drives that stretch of Interstate 5, but she never turns on the radio anymore. Sometimes, late at night, she wonders if somewhere out there another version of herself is still driving toward mile marker 127, listening to a radio station that doesn't exist, racing toward an accident that hasn't happened yet.